Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 82 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me, my fellow traveller in the phenomenal field and the existential vista, Mr. Ken Kelly. How you doing, Ken?
I am exceptionally well, loving British summertime. It's just a beautiful country to live in when there is green, when there are flowers, and when the sun is out. Feeling good. And specifically about today's episode 82, absolutely jam-packed, full of value. We're going to be kicking off speaking about affective study, which I think is pretty relevant, not relevant, for this time of year. And then we're going to be looking at Practice Matters with Rory, where we're looking at taking risks in therapy. Ooh, this sounds like I should be wearing my safety harness, Rory.
Well, yes, there was a wonderful blog a few years ago called Tales of a Boundary Ninja. Oh. And I'm going to be talking about taking risks in therapy and how we manage that within the boundaries of our professional life.
Like it, and looking forward to that. And then we're going to be ending today looking at a topic: faith, internal or external locus of evaluation. So an interesting episode, and kicking off with affective study. It is that time of year. Many of us are finishing assignments, finishing final pieces of work, and working towards the end of the academic year. Academic year here in the United Kingdom, and of course that means studying, looking over your work, committing that to memory, and we're going to be looking at how to do that effectively. Rory, you're going to be sharing some ideas.
I am indeed, and the first idea I'm going to share is a piece of research that's been undertaken recently, and it proves that writing down something is more effective than writing it on a computer, using the pen or a pencil, and writing it on a piece of paper. You retain more information than you do if you type it on a laptop. And the reason for that is that different parts of the brain activate when you're doing different types of activity, and writing is one that you retain more information, which isn't surprising because we've probably been writing for 2,000 years, I would imagine, or a bit longer, and we've been typing for, I don't know, perhaps 50. So, it's not surprised that the brain has adapted to writing information down. And of course, that can be really useful to allow people, when you write stuff down. I'm doing a course at the moment. When I write stuff down, it's just amazing how much I retain. What say you, Ken?
Definitely, the recall from the written word is definitely. It's clearer, and it is clearer for me. I can only speak from my frame of reference here, but I did see some information on this where it was suggested that when we read something, we use a certain part of our brain for that activity. But when we write something down, we use another part of our brain. We're still reading it, but we're also writing it. So we're almost doubling our ability to be able to retain and recall that information when needed. So it makes sense. You've got twice as much chance, I guess, if the information is in two places and joined together with some kind of a network, easier to recall. One of the things that I loved from study, and what really helped me, and it's was creating cheat sheets. Now, when I say cheat sheet, I recall getting an email through Counselling Tutor of someone saying, cheat sheets? You can't say the word cheat sheet when it comes to counselling. What I mean by cheat sheet is a cheat sheet for me is a go-to sheet with key bits of information on. So if you take person-centered theory, for example, you might just write down all the words that are related to person-centered theory. So you have your cheat sheet there. You have it with you in your learning institution. When you're covering a topic and they mention a bit of person-centered theory, you add the word. So you might say locus of evaluation. You might pop that on your cheat sheet. You might put in your core conditions on your cheat sheet. When it comes to writing an assignment, when you're called on to bring that theory in, you take out your cheat sheet and all those little points are there. The information's not there. You then need to apply it to your assignment. But having that sheet, a little crib list, really helpful.
Yeah, it really is good. And I would say to people, That's really good. If you're doing exams, you don't take it into your exam room, but no, don't do that. But it really is useful as a way of getting information in. The other is flashcards.
Oh, yeah.
You get yourself some postcards, white postcards, back and front, and you just write a piece of theory on the front, and on the back of the card you write what it is, and then you just hold them up and turn them round. You look at it and you try and guess, and then you turn them round. It's really good if you've got a study buddy, because you can make a game out of it. So you might make 20 of these, and then one study buddy holds the question up, and then you have to answer it, and then you turn it around to see if it's the correct answer. And it's a fun game as well. You can have a lot of fun using flashcards. Really, really useful.
It is effective. There's another effective study method, and my daughter uses actually going into her GCSE year now, and they're doing kind of mocks at the moment, and she's using flashcards, and they're really effective for her. And another effective study method for some. If you are maybe auditory, you enjoy listening to things, and we have so many emails from you, our listeners, saying, hey, we love the podcast because I really learn by listening rather than reading. Well, you can actually take advantage of that using a simple recording device, even your mobile phone or anything you have handy. And when you read something, a little bit of theory or something that you need to commit to memory, just read it out loud and record what it is that you are reading and play it back to yourself. Make your own mini podcast on the little bit of theory that you need to learn, and you can play it over and over again in your car as you drive along, however you wish it. And this actually comes from a friend of mine who is an actor, and it is a common way of memorizing lines. You read the lines out as if you read the script through, and then you just listen to it over and over again. It becomes like a song. It actually, even when you're not actively listening to it, it's still going in. It hits that subconscious, and you can be surprised at how much information you can recall from that.
Well, that's a really good idea.
Nice.
That. And talk about the subconscious. One of the kind of modern ideas in studying is something called biohacking, and basically it's making your brain work more effectively. And there's one way that you can make your brain work super effectively is by getting enough sleep.
Oh yeah.
If and I've just written in the newsletter, the Counselling Tutor newsletter. And if you're interested in getting the Counselling Tutor newsletter, if you go to counsellingtutor.com, our mother site, and you put yourself onto the mailing list, when the newsletter comes out, we'll send you one into your inbox. But having a good night's sleep is really useful, because we know that stress hormones really limit the ability for you to learn. Ever left your car keys and couldn't find them, and you're running around like a headless chicken looking for, where's my car keys? Where's my car? You get really stressed, and eventually you sit down, and after a few minutes you realise you've left them on the table, they're right in front of you. And that's because when you're stressed, the top part of the brain, which does all the kind of big thinking, is limited. It shuts down a bit. So having a good night's sleep, getting lots of rest, especially before exams, is really useful, and it works.
Stress is really a mind blocker, as you've just said there, Rory, and that's worth taking into consideration with regards your study work and putting time aside to plan. As the deadline gets closer, the stress hormones can go up as you feel maybe anxious in anticipation for those, and it's less easy to commit the information to memory, as Rory said, because you don't have the full functioning of your brain when you're in that stressful situation. And you spoke, Rory, about getting a good night's sleep, and that is so important, to be well rested, but also to look at what your energy patterns look like. And we're all different. We all have different energy patterns. The time of day when we feel most active. Now, for me, that is really early in the morning. I love getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Some people say I'm mad. As I'm saying this, Rory is smiling and shaking his head and giggling because my energy patterns are really high in the morning. I'm most productive in the morning. I get most done in the morning. I'm most able to concentrate and give my attention early in the morning. Whereas after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I have nothing left. I'm spent. I find it really difficult to do even the most simple of tasks. So understanding where your energy levels are highest gives you an indication of where you can put your study in. So for me, if I was to study right now, I would be looking to study early in the morning. And Rory, I think you are more later afternoon. That's where your energy levels sit.
Yeah, it's interesting. My energy levels are higher in the night, and depending on the day, can go right through into the early hours. So it's not unusual for me to start finish when Ken starts. So I could quite happily type away till 4 o'clock in the morning. They've got a really good idea going on for me, because I get really, really productive in the early hours of the morning. So it's about understanding, I guess, your own physiology and the way that your body reacts to learning, and just harnessing that.
Definitely. And similar topic is take regular breaks. If you find that you're now sitting down, you've got the theory that you need to make your way through for that counselling assignment that is pending, and you find yourself drifting off, you find yourself reading the same line a few times over, you find yourself thinking about having a sandwich or a cup of tea, and you wondering, where was I for the last few seconds? It's a great indicator that it's time for a break. We speak all the time on the Counselling Tutor podcast about self-care, and self-care related to study is really important. If you are forcing yourself to push through immense resistance and you're just not getting anywhere, you're hating it, you've got feelings inside you that are going, I want out of here. Take a break, walk away from it, take an hour away, go for a lie down for 15, 20 minutes, a cat nap, and come back to it. Try and kind of break that cycle.
Yeah, and I guess it's what underneath it all, it comes down to, like everything in counselling, individual preference and what works best for you. And, just get to understand the way that you learn. And once you can harness it, you'll be flying along. It's amazing. Once I understood that I was better off learning in a certain way, there was really no stopping me.
Well, hopefully that is helpful as we approach that time of year where we're required to learn, commit stuff to memory for those assignments, for those exams. But now looking at practice and taking risks in therapy, this is a really interesting one. And I know that often, Rory, the best work is done at that edge where you're kind of taking that risk, but it's called a risk for a reason. What can we expect?
Well, I'm going to, and I've plagiarized this. I'm going to talk about being a boundary ninja. I'm working right at the edge of boundaries and doing it in a thoughtful way for, in the service of the client. Sometimes I think that when as students we move into qualified life, we have a very, very fixed view of what we can and cannot do in the therapy room. And I think as you mature and you distill your theory, you find that you can be more flexible depending on the client. And I'm going to outline that and explain certain situations where you may stretch the boundary a little bit in the service of the client.
Looking forward to this one. Let's get straight into Practice Matters.
Practice Matters.
Perhaps one of the most contentious moments in all of my counselling training happened on the second year of my diploma. Our tutor, a very experienced and well-qualified practitioner, read a passage from a counselling book in which the author was relating an interaction with a client who had told him he was consuming 4 bottles of wine a night. The author replied, "That's a lot." What followed was nothing short of an uproar. Some of the class exploded in indignation that a therapist could be so judgmental and directive. Others in the group countered that speaking the truth was a fundamentally congruent, and drinking 4 bottles of wine a night is quite simply not good for your health. As we all calmed down, the tutor asked us to work in groups and explore what risks we were willing to take in therapy and why. 8 years later, I attended an Introduction to Transactional Analysis course, which was taught by an Australian therapist. She spoke about her experiences with a client who had become quite childlike in the therapy room in order to gain her attention as a form of game playing. She reflected that on one occasion she was getting so fed up about this behaviour, she said to him, "I think that's enough." She observed that part of the client's script was to act like a child to try to gain some form of attention. She reasoned that her intervention invited him to return to the adult he was and not get drawn into a parent-child interaction. It struck me that as a therapist she took a big risk in confronting the client in such a direct way, but on reflection wondered how I might deal with the same situation. A few days later, I was sharing this story with someone who had been in recovery from alcohol and substance misuse for a long time. He reflected that when in the throes of addiction, he attended a counselling session having used. He went on to tell me that halfway through the session, he decided he'd had enough and said to the counsellor, "I'm off now to pick my kids up from school," to which the counsellor replied, "I would not let you look after my kids in the state you're in." I asked how he felt about this, and he said, "Biggest wake-up call I ever had." At the time, he was 4 years clean. So back to my diploma class. As the exercise finished, it became obvious that some of my peers thought that taking risks was something necessary to help the client's own process. Others felt that it was too directive and judgmental. Some reflected that speaking the truth is the truth, and therapy may not always feel comfortable for the client or indeed the therapist. One of the things I clearly remember was how my peers viewed risk. Some believed it could damage the relationship and the client may never return. I suspect that this lesson, above all, really formed the practitioners they were to become. Over the years, I've reflected on this lesson a lot, especially on what the tutor reflected in the plenary session. She observed, "If you take a risk, you're basically taking a chance that something may go wrong, i.e. the client may never return. You can limit the risk by being thoughtful in how you engage with it. Don't take risks in the early stages of therapy. Let the relationship form and trust develop. Acknowledge to the client that some reflections may be hard for them to hear. Stay in the adult and do not be drawn in with transference or counter-transference or get harpooned by projective identification. Use supervision to explore what risk you want to take or to reflect on the outcome of risks you've taken and what happened. Ask yourself the question, who is this for, before engaging with the client. Finally, it's always worth reflecting on those people in your life who have taken a risk and fed back to you things which may have been hard to hear. How did that impact on your personal development and emotional growth?
Thank you, as always, Rory. Really informative, really interesting. And of course, if you want to get Rory's super duper handout, you can do so by going to our website. That is counsellingtutor.com. And on the homepage, just click on the podcast tab. That's going to take you to all of our podcast episodes. This is episode 82. Navigate to 82. And all of the notes from today's episodes are there, including any links we may have mentioned. And you can download Rory's handout on taking risks in therapy right there from within the page. So moving on, and the topic is faith, internal, external locus of evaluation.
Yes, I'd like to thank Wilhelmina Dixon, one of our Facebook members. And if you want to join our Facebook group, if you just go into Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. We're a closed group. If you knock on the door, of course, we're going to let you in. And you can join 18,000 like-minded people, students, qualified practitioners, supervisors, and tutors, all talking about counselling and counselling-related topics. And Wilhelmina Dixon posted this, I think, an interesting question. Is religion an internal or external locus of evaluation? Well, I think if we look at the humanistic movement and the work of Carl Rogers, it was founded on what was called the human potential movement. And humanism is a distinct kind of set of ideas and ways of living your life, which is different to religion. It's not better or worse, it's just a different view. And in terms of internal or external locus of evaluation, well, I suppose that if somebody is, if the texts say that people are sinful when they're born, I was at a christening the other day and they were talking about original sin, then I suppose technically it could be an external locus of evaluation. And in fact, there's some interesting historic precedents here. I did a little bit of research, and when Rogers went to work for, or went to help found the Western Behavioral Sciences Institute after he left Wisconsin, he got very interested in encounter groups, which you would know as personal development groups. And he did one with what was called the Immaculate Heart Community in the 1960s. And there were 600 sisters who were working in elementary schools. And as part of a kind of change in society, they were asked to kind of look at a different way of approaching how you communicate with people and how you look at interacting, and maybe not coming from such a faith-based position. And he did this. What happened is the actual community split up. And his two associates, Bruce Medder and Bill Colson, who were conducting the encounter groups, Bill Colson actually said, he said that using the kind of person-centered perspective probably contributed to the community starting to break up and reforming into something different. But it's really interesting, this, Ken, because many years ago when I used to do residentials, I had a wonderful discussion with a Catholic priest. We held a residential at a Catholic seminary, and I sat down with the priest over a beer one night. We had a long discussion about faith and humanism and how we relate to people. And one of the things that we could both solidly agree on was common ground. People of faith, people in the humanistic movements have a huge amount of common ground. In other words, about doing the right thing to your fellow person, being a good person in the world. And, everything else seems to be on the periphery. Yes, people have faith, people don't have faith, but it's about how we relate to each other and how we understand each other's meanings in the world that I think is really super important.
I think it's a super interesting topic and one that can be debated deeply. And I think you may get different views on this, different answers, different thoughts on this, depending on who you might be speaking to and what your experience of life is, what your faith base is. And for me, what's interesting is I'm trying to parallel this to person-centered therapy. And so external locus of evaluation, kind of the meaning to me, is when a person is acting not from what they truly believe within themselves, but to an external set of factors. What will those people think? I better do this right, else they're not going to think good of me. So it's they're not going to think good of me is the external locus of evaluation. So the word locus comes from the base word location, a location outside of yourself. So I'm living my life from a base outside of myself. And it's an interesting question, because if you think about, we study person-centered theory, and I'm just using person-centered as an example here. So we study that theory, and then we go into a therapy room and we work with that theory. Is person-centered therapy not in a way an external locus of evaluation, where we are using that theory, which is external, thought of by someone else, we're taking that as our own and bringing that into the session? So it's just a really interesting topic, I think.
It is, and I found I'm really grateful, and I can't remember who it was, so I can't give them a credit, so I'm very sorry, but I was reading the other day that you can't really call person-centered therapy an existential therapy. And the reason for that is that Rogers believes that we were born with an intrinsic part of us that wanted to self-actualize. Now, in existential thinking, in existential philosophy, John Paul Sartre, who's the founder of it, would say that existence precedes essence. In other words, we're born and then we find what is meaningful in the world and how we are. The opposite side of that is essence precedes existence. In other words, we're born with a human essence, whatever that is. We may get it from faith, or we may get it from Roger's self-actualization, and then we develop along that path. So, yeah, maybe a discussion in the Facebook page, a respectful discussion in the Facebook page, but it is interesting. But it is, I think, all about the common ground and respecting people's positions in the world.
Like it. Thank you very much for that question. Really interesting topic. Agree with you, Rory. It's definitely one for the Facebook group. And you were speaking there about existential therapy, and there's a great lecture. If you are a member of the paid-for part of Counselling Tutor, we have something called the Counselling Study Resource, and it's a massive resource with a load of lectures, theory, skills. It's all in there. And Rory, you did a lecture on existential therapy. It is outstanding.
Thank you.
It's definitely worth a visit. Go and go and have a look at that. And it is that. What was it about essence? Existence precedes essence. Essence.
Yeah, right. So if you're an existentialist, existence precedes essence. In other words, you exist in the world, then you find the meaning of it. If you're not, then its essence precedes existence. In other words, you're born with an essence. Could be a religious essence. It could be a self-actualization essence, and then you develop that essence through the path of your life.
This is all beautifully covered in that lecture. So if you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, log in and go and revisit that lecture. And remember, you can get counselling, you can get your CPD. You can claim it for your CPD, print out your certificate from doing that as well. That brings us to the end of episode 82 of Counselling Tutor Podcast. In this episode, we spoke about effective study. We looked at taking risks in therapy, and we spoke about faith, internal or external locus of evaluation.
Yeah, it's been a great episode. And as always, the message that I send out to you at the end of the episode is stay grounded, stay safe.
If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory Lees-Oakes to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.